think we want to say he's wrong about everything. But this notion of there must be an explanation for something. So to answer your question about how this shuts off mythological or religious explanations, I don't think it does. I think there's great controversy throughout this time period. And I mean, I'll point you to the Middle Ages, right? Part of what gets Galileo in trouble is he's challenging the church, and the church, the Catholic Church, has built its model of astronomy on Aristotle's model of astronomy. And because Aristotle's physics, his theory of physics, was so powerful and so effective at predicting the world and predicting events, it was hard to believe it could be false. Now, Aristotle's physics is built on the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe, that we have a finite universe, and the center of the Earth is the center of that universe. We still talk about sunrise and sunset, despite believing, I hope, that the Earth is revolving around the sun, not vice versa, but that legacy of that model of the center of the Earth is the center of the universe. It's so powerful that it takes Galileo and his cohort a tremendous amount of data. You mentioned a paradigm shift. Well, that's the most famous paradigm shift of all, right? The Copernican revolution, this overthrowing the Aristotelian picture, where we no longer think the Earth is the center. We recognize that the sun is what we're orbiting rather than the sun orbiting us. And that a tremendous critical mass of counter evidence has to develop before anybody will even entertain that Aristotle was wrong. Right. In part because I can point to Aristotle and say, you know what? I can navigate across an ocean based on Aristotelian models of astronomy. I can use the stars and it works, right? Aristotle tells me that this is where the stars should be. And if I navigate that way, I get where I'm going. What better evidence could you want that he's right than that? And yet we know, I think we know in some strong sense of the word know, that it was false. And of course, we're still arguing today about the role of religion and its real or perceived conflict with science. And there are plenty of people that will attribute, beliefs about climate change to mythology, right? And my sense, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
Well, there are many authors working today that talk about this deep human need to have that kind of narrative, right? And one of the reasons that humans are vulnerable to conspiracy theories or prone to jumping to all kinds of ill-supported conclusions is that we're creatures of narrative, not creatures of pure reason. And that trying to explain things the way that the ancients are trying to explain them, maybe I can reach your heart, but I can't reach, maybe I can reach your head, but I can't reach your heart, right? And forgive the sort of hollow language there, but you're not at all in the minority if you say, well, I understand all that stuff intellectually, but it doesn't reach me where I live. And I can recite to you, 10 different standard criticisms of traditional theological arguments and proofs of God's existence. And never in my life have I met a single person that had their religious beliefs changed by any one of those arguments.
Right.
Yeah, there's a great gap between the reason and the passion. And Kierkegaard makes this point much later, 19th century, right? That if you treat religion like a math proof, you don't understand religion. And you might love mathematics, but you don't have the appropriate emotional commitment to a math proof that religion requires. And yes, I'm collapsing religion and mythology here, and I hope I'm not offending anybody in doing that. But I don't think it does get closed off. By the time, and something else to keep in mind you've studied mythology, you've mentioned, Eros and things. We have we need to name things, right? And there's a transition. So one of the characters that we get to, Heraclitus, will actually use that word logos to describe this fundamental principle of change in the universe. The Stoic philosophers down in the third and second centuries are going to talk about the logos as the rational principle of the universe. That it's whatever it is that provides that order, that regularity, that predictive power. Excuse me, but when you read the first line of the Gospel of John in Christianity, right? En arche en hologos kai hologos proston theon. In the arche, in the beginning, in the principle, there was the logos. Now, Christians standardly translate that as in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was of God.
Right.
But this document is written in Greek and brought back to a Latin-speaking Roman population that is thoroughly familiar with Stoicism. And so they were very familiar with arguments about this thing they called the Logos, which they referred to as, or which would have referred to the rationality and the order and the structure of the universe. So if you read that line of John as a bit of Stoicism, it's in the beginning, the underlying principle, going all the way back to Heraclitus, same word, arche, right? This most fundamental thing in the universe is the logos. They meant rational, orderly organization, intelligence. In Christianity, it's the Word was made flesh, right? The rationality of the universe gets turned into a human in the body of Christ. Yes.
This is fascinating. I hate to cut it short because you just have taken a couple of steps into another tangent that would be great to follow up on if you're up for it, and that is the tension between monotheism and polytheism, and its relation to religion in mythos, logos. They tend to blur a bit,
Yeah.
in terms of what constitutes monotheism. There's the scientific. There's also the
And
Aquinas and the Christian church. So we're going to put that. And you mentioned Eros in opposite. It's often portrayed in opposition to logos. In mythos is often a binary to logos, and I hope we can hold out some hope because we're living in Pericles' time. We can find some way to get the head and the heart into some sort of coherent dialogue that's generative, that recognizes that we don't have all the answers, but neither does it make sense to throw out basic tenets of reason that have got us as far as we have. So
well,
um,
you're the linguist, so I'll defer to you on this one. But one of the things, how much the same name, right, can, so Eros in one sense is a particular god, right? It's a name for a divine being. By the time Plato and Aristotle are writing, it's a term that is used to describe an emotional state. It's
right.
not, but associated with that god somehow. The closest contemporary example I can think of is the notion of death, right? If I capitalize the word death, I get a Grim Reaper picture in my head, right? And
Yeah.
that there's a connotation to that, even if I don't believe there's an actual Grim Reaper out there.
Hmm.
And that notion of what was once upon a time attributed to a god, but still names something that is essentially mysterious to me.
Right.
We see this with Eros. We see this with strife, eris, right? So Empedocles, one of the pre-Socratics, is going to refer to strife as this. He seems to be using it as like a force, but by
Mm.
using the word strife, he's evoking Eris, that fury, that goddess of strife. So even the language, we're still locked into the language we were using
Yeah.
when we were talking about the gods. And it's an open question as to what the referent is, so to speak, when I use the word eros or the word eris, right?
We got to keep spinning it back because somewhere in moving all the way back to that origin story and that arrows, you mentioned the death instinct, and that's a classic Freudian
Mm.
scientific materialistic reinvention of those mythologisms around the tension between basically a life instinct and death instinct, eros and thanatos. Lots of oppositions, lots of good language stuff, for a language person. It's fascinating to me. But this has been very enlightening. I appreciate your generosity of time and expertise, and can we maybe do a follow-up on monotheism and the many
Sure,
how
and
that fits in this?
don't forget the neglected middle twin or middle sibling there, henotheism, right? The belief that there are many gods, but I'm only affiliated with this one.
Okay,
So this is the beginning of cults, not crazy people cults, but the tradition of we believe in lots of gods, but
right.
we're associated with this one in particular. This is arguably how Judaism gets started, right? Before it's monotheistic, we have a special relationship with the God of Abraham or Yahweh, right?
Right.
But we might believe in others; they're just gods of other folks.
Hmm.
So a stepping
Fascinating.
stone, yeah.
Love it.
Sure, whatever you like. I
All
clearly
right.
can ramble on a lot more on this anytime you need me to. So
Excellent. Thank you so much.
sure, thank you.